Tonight, highway to hugs, the emotional reunions as Queensland borders reopen. Victoria records 288 new cases, the biggest daily jump in Australia since the pandemic began. Isolation in the outback, how remote Australians deal with the crisis and limited communication. And the Broncos just want to have fun. The players rewrite the playbook in the hope of breaking their losing streak. Good evening, Jessica Van Vonderen with ABC News. The Sunshine State has thrown open its borders, ending a 15-week isolation from the rest of the country. Tens of thousands of visitors have streamed through police checkpoints, chasing the sun, reuniting with family, and for one special couple, meeting in person for the first time.
The arrival of midday, the 10th of July, has been a long time coming.
We've been sitting on the other side for a fortnight.
Yeah, we tried before, but weren't let through because our car screams holiday.
The advice from police: arrive early in the morning or late in the day, but don't forget your paperwork or your GPS.
We accidentally came across it.
We got lost.
If we can just see some form of identification, their border declaration and some form of proof that they've been in New South Wales for more than 14 days, we'd be happy with that.
It wasn't picture perfect in the Sunshine State, but the welcome for the first flight about as warm as water cannon can get, and the feeling was mutual.
And how excited are you to be on the ferry? We're called the Shushies because we always get shushed.
Inside airport terminals across the state, there was the odd lapse of social distancing as people were brought together. Mothers and children, favourite cousins, or the kid who finally found Nemo. The tourism industry is really pulling out the stops in the hope this can revive a struggling sector.
And I'm not sure they know what's hit them with the party that's going on, and it feels like Christmas here today.
Inland, it was a grey invasion, a convoy of caravans, but no one was getting in before Adelaide's Craig Dixon, who'd lined up since 6 a.m. to see his girlfriend.
How long's it been since you've seen your girlfriend in Brisbane?
I haven't met her yet. We've met online.
More than 300,000 people have downloaded the border declaration form, pointing to a huge influx. But Victorians are out in the cold, unless it's essential travel. Queensland Police will be physically boarding all flights from Melbourne to process passengers. Anyone who doesn't meet the requirements will be escorted to buy a new ticket home, and if the flight doesn't leave immediately, they'll be put up in a hotel at their own expense until it leaves. Queenslanders who've been in Victoria will be put into hotel quarantine for 14 days, also at their own expense. It's a regime that'll be in place for the foreseeable future, but one most are taking in their stride. Matt Wordsworth, ABC News.
Jennifer Huxley joins us now from the Queensland-New South Wales border. And Jen, what have traffic conditions been like?
Jess, traffic has just been slow and steady since the border reopened at noon. Police on both sides of the border had warned drivers to expect queues of around 20 kilometres, but it's been nothing like that, with lines of around 3 to 5 kilometres and wait times of about 40 minutes. Traffic did noticeably slow here at Coolangatta at around 5 p.m, but at no stage has it come to a complete standstill. Now, these delays and traffic are expected to continue well into the weekend, and anyone who doesn't need to travel is urged to stay off the roads.
Jennifer Huxley, thanks for the update. For the first time, 5 million Victorians in the state's lockdown zone have been urged to wear face masks where physical distancing isn't possible. The new health advice coincides with Australia's biggest number yet in coronavirus cases, with another 288 added today. Just 26 have been linked to known outbreaks. 262 are still under investigation. It comes off the back of the biggest ever day of testing, with more than 37,000 tests conducted yesterday. The number of Victorians in hospital has also jumped to 47. 12 are in intensive care. In an effort to again flatten the curve, millions of single-use and reusable masks will be distributed for places like public transport, taxis and shopping centres. But some Victorians are continuing to flout the stay-at-home orders. In one breach, 16 partygoers were fined $26,000 overnight. It's feared the case tally will climb even higher. Ben Knight reports.
There's no sugarcoating a rise like this.
Certainly 288 new cases today is a pretty ugly number.
There are now more than 1,100 active cases across Victoria and hotspots in Melbourne's northwest corridor, especially in the suburbs of Craigieburn, Roxburgh Park and Truganina, which are still showing high rates of community transmission.
Those suburbs, people really need to have an awareness that if they've got symptoms, this may well be coronavirus. You should not be seeing other people.
So I know and understand there'll be concern across the community to see that number. It was always going to get worse before it got better.
But the massive spike in daily cases has led to a significant change in health advice. After months of being told wearing masks wasn't necessary, Melburnians are now being advised they should wear them when outside and unable to maintain physical distance, such as on public transport or when shopping, but not in schools. And they should get used to the idea.
If you can wear a mask where you can't distance, that's exactly what we would like you to do.
2 million reusable masks are now being made for distribution in the community. The advice on wearing them won't be enforced, but police are ramping up their offensive against people who break the existing rules.
Police have issued 60 infringements in the past 24 hours, including a couple from Docklands who tried to breach 2 roadblocks on their way to Phillip Island, and 16 people at a birthday party in Dandenong after a tip-off that a KFC had taken a big order in the early hours of morning.
That's $26,000 that birthday party's costing them. That's a heck of a birthday party to recall.
As for gatherings like this,
whale watching down Mornington Way, totally unacceptable, total breach of the distancing rules.
I'm free! For residents of the towers that have been locked down for almost a week, today was their first chance to venture outside.
I love those bird sounds. God, that's what I love about being outside.
Oh, just to get outside's a relief.
And with a wet weekend ahead, the Premier is urging Melburnians to stay indoors.
This is not a normal weekend. It really isn't. And I just appeal to everybody to play their part.
And to get used to it. Ben Knight, ABC News.
A pub in Sydney's southwest has been forced to close after 2 coronavirus cases were linked to the hotel. Authorities say the 2 cases are unrelated, but both visited the Crossroads Hotel in Casula last Friday night. The pub has been closed for cleaning while contacts are traced.
But it appears to be a likely point of connection where the 2 people could have actually come into some contact, at least with the virus.
A pop-up testing facility has opened in the pub car park tonight, with long lines already waiting to be swabbed. Australians trying to get home from overseas are about to find it much harder to make the journey. The last 3 operating international airports are halving the number of people they accept to just 600 a day between them. And if passengers do get a seat, they'll pay for their own fortnight in hotel quarantine as soon as they arrive. Here's National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett.
For us, it feels like Mother India doesn't want us to go.
Her teaching visa runs out in a few days, but Deb Tellis from Newcastle's already feeling totally banged up in Bangalore.
It has been extremely stressful the last 4 weeks trying to get out of the country.
Tickets out cost more than $2,000. Government evacuation flights, when they happen, are massively overbooked.
Just plead with the Australian government to help us get out of here.
She'll find no joy in Canberra.
We'll be in a restricted capacity for the foreseeable future.
Because Scott Morrison's agreed to requests from the states to throttle back further on flights for returning Australians. For the last month, an average 7,000 passengers arrived at the borders each week. Now the total will be capped at around 4,000 a week, shared unevenly by states with international airports, except Victoria, which is closed completely. States are bailing out of their exposure to the 2-week hotel quarantining regime, both on the numbers they're prepared to accommodate and the funding they provide. Every one of them will enforce a traveller pays rule.
Where possible, we'll seek to have some sort of national uniformity across those pricings.
There's no doubt hotel quarantining has helped protect the country from imported cases of coronavirus, but it's been anything but flawless, which is why National Cabinet's appointed retired senior bureaucrat Jane Holton to review the lot of it, from the training of staff to rules on testing and the care of young, sick and elderly passengers who've been subjected to it. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
It hasn't been a great week for coronavirus in Australia, and it has some infectious disease experts asking, is our strategy the right one? ABC analyst Casey Briggs looks at some of the latest evidence.
At the start of this pandemic, we didn't know which strategy would give us the best result. We still don't. Different countries approach the problem in different ways, and some that saw early success have taken a turn for the worse. And the global experience has shown how opening up the country again is akin to walking a precarious tightrope. We're now seeing the consequences in Melbourne of when you fall off.
The virus's natural inclination is to grow, and the virus is naturally a sociopath.
Sweden took a very different approach to much of the rest of the world, avoiding enforced lockdowns. For now at least, the country has one of the highest per capita death rates in the world.
The findings is the high death toll among the people in the long-term care facilities that we really wish we could have done something about.
These are Victoria's cases. They only started to surge back into the double digits less than a month ago, leading to the situation Melbourne is now in. Compare that with Israel, a country that had employed similar strategies to suppress the virus and now has a similar shaped curve. This week, the country closed a swathe of businesses indefinitely, but its leaders don't want to move to a complete lockdown while unemployment runs at 20%. Some experts think pursuing suppression is futile because it will likely lead to a cycle of lockdowns repeating.
When it takes off like it has in the public housing, in the hotspot areas, then you've got to reintroduce lockdown. It's more difficult emotionally to cope with, and it's very difficult economically.
New Zealand presents one alternative. It pursued a more aggressive strategy than Australia. Eradicate the virus domestically and then keep the borders closed while returning to almost normal life.
Going hard and going early gave us the very best chance of stamping out the virus.
But will that work forever? And can our Kiwi neighbours be sure the virus is actually gone? We just don't know.
Several crews are battling a house fire at Hamilton in Brisbane tonight. The blaze engulfed the two-storey home in Winchester Street, forcing the evacuation of a unit complex next door. Fire crews rescued one person from those apartments. The residents from the house are safe. 5 Australian journalists face an uncertain future in Malaysia after documenting the struggles of migrant workers there. The team from Al Jazeera were questioned by police in Kuala Lumpur after politicians accused them of tarnishing Malaysia's image. Now they've been threatened with sedition charges. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
An uncertain wait in a cramped police station. Australian journalist Drew Ambrose and his team spent weeks documenting Malaysia's crackdown on migrant workers during the coronavirus pandemic.
When you look at these raids, you can't help but think, is this the practical reality of dealing with a pandemic? Or is it racism?
Their story revealed how illegal migrants were rounded up in detention centres despite the threat posed by the virus.
It's only when the trucks leave that you realise what's going on.
They are not murderers, they are not criminal, they are just undocumented
It drew a furious response in Malaysia. The journalists were peppered with death threats online. Enraged politicians and officials called the documentary misleading.
I've got my ID.
Now the Attorney General is contemplating hitting them with sedition charges.
No camera. We will check with the AG first. The AG will decide whether there is any case, then if they need to be charged.
Catapulting the team of 6, 5 of whom are Australian, into their own headlines.
Several Al Jazeera staff have been questioned by police in Kuala Lumpur.
Australian officials are offering consular support while the international broadcaster is backing its staff. Charging journalists for doing their job is not the action of a democracy that values free speech. Al Jazeera said journalism is not a crime. If the journalists are charged, they could face the prospect of jail time. That would create many more international headlines and a diplomatic headache for the Morrison government. Australian officials will be working hard to resolve this quietly behind the scenes. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Canberra.
A ruling by the United States Supreme Court has paved the way for President Donald Trump's tax records to be publicly released, though it may not be before the November election. Mr Trump is the first US president to withhold his financial records in almost 50 years. He lashed out at the ruling, describing himself as the victim of a political prosecution.
I'm not satisfied because, frankly, this is a political witch hunt, the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. It's a pure witch hunt. It's a hoax.
In another move opposed by the president, city officials joined Black Lives Matter activists to emblazon their message on the roadway in front of Trump Tower in Manhattan. As the Lebanese financial crisis worsens, Australians with relatives there are facing new barriers to help desperate family members. The Lebanese currency is crashing and it's becoming harder for many people to buy food. But families in Australia are finding that simply sending money is also difficult. Middle East correspondent Eric Tworcek reports.
Desperate for cash, people in Lebanon crowd the currency exchange shops on a daily basis to collect money sent from relatives overseas. Mohammed Durgam says he wouldn't be able to support his family without it.
If we didn't have people sending us money from overseas, we would have been humiliated. Life is very hard.
Mohammed's brother in Sydney, Waleed, sends him money every week.
Believe me, every day worry for my family, for other people too, because Allah help other people. You know, plenty of people he give me call to help.
A financial and economic meltdown has triggered waves of unrest in Lebanon. The currency has collapsed and banks have run out of money. Shops and hotels are closing because they can't set a fair price for their goods.
We will close until there is a clear economic policy in this country and we know how to move forward.
The financial meltdown is fueling extreme poverty, and even the basics are out of reach for some.
You can't even buy the bare minimum for a household. Nothing is working in this country. It's all doomed.
It's hard for relatives to even send money to Lebanon right now because the country has so little cash. Banks have imposed tight limits on withdrawals and money transfer services have run out of American dollars, all while prices continue to go up. In Sydney, Waleed Durgam is increasingly afraid for his relatives.
I'm not like my parents who live in Lebanon. For what? For no food, no life, no sleep, no money.
Lebanon's government is trying to get an international bailout before things go from bad to worse. Eric Tworcek, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Isolation has been top of the mental health agenda this year, with many Australians making big sacrifices during the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's an issue remote cattle stations have been grappling with for decades. Eric Barker travelled to Woodstock Station in Queensland's Gulf Country, where fostering mental well-being is a major focus.
The day starts early on remote Woodstock Station, where business and pleasure mix in the dawn light. Jade Lord moved to the area from Brisbane 8 years ago and brought yoga with her.
I didn't realise the health and the mental benefits that it was actually giving me until I was missing it.
Sensing others in the vast region were craving the same outlet,
Good morning, ladies.
the mother of two started online classes for the bush, and business is booming.
Even the actual physical yoga practice, it's the space and it's the conversation that is actually created when we're all together.
Building a strong sense of community is also important for the station, with about 20 employees living several hours from the nearest town.
I did a number of years working out on stations before I came home, and I know the best of them were the places where you always felt like you were really part of the family.
Most of the workers rely on social media to keep in touch with friends and family.
You know, a lot of these fellas are here, they love the work, they love the environment, love the people, but everybody still has a heart which might be connected to somewhere else, and I think being able to keep in touch with that is pretty important.
But staying connected can be tricky when you're this remote. Hundreds of kilometres from the nearest town, there's no mobile phone coverage and the internet comes from a satellite. And while there have been improvements in these services over the years, the connection is still a long way behind the cities. Sick of the dropouts, one local grazier built his own internet.
First of all, we hooked up our station, but then the neighbours said to us, oh, we wouldn't mind being able to do that too, and it grew from there.
It now covers more than 20,000 square kilometres and softens the challenges of living in the bush. But not for the Lord family, who live outside its footprint.
We just roll with the punches and we just work with it and do the best we can.
Eric Barker, ABC News, Richmond.
And this week, the ABC has been sharing tips and information supporting your mental health on our website. To finance now, global share markets have tumbled as coronavirus fears intensify. The concerns also undermined commodity prices, which added to domestic market pressures. Here's Philip Lasker.
There's not much joy to take us into the weekend. Surging coronavirus cases across the US raised fears of another lockdown in several states. So most major markets weakened, even red-hot Shanghai. Not much heat here. Today's fall capping off a pretty poor week. Softer commodity prices hurt miners, particularly energy shares, and Sydney Airport is a victim of the intensifying restrictions. No one thinks Victoria's problems will derail the national recovery underway right now, at least not yet. Most analysts have downgraded their growth forecasts, but there are a lot of moving parts. How long will the lockdown last? Will other states suffer similar fates? Here's a clear and timely indication of what's happening in Victoria. The orange line shows dining and takeaway spending collapsed in Melbourne's 10 hotspot postcodes, much worse than the rest of Melbourne, shown by the blue line. Commodity prices weakened. Gold has benefited due to concerns about global money printing and the spread of COVID. It's taking a bit of a breather as money flows back to the US dollar. That's partly why the Australian dollar is below 69.5 US cents again. It's also a reflection of concerns about coronavirus. Which reminds me of this other little problem. We've had a recession, yet there are far fewer insolvencies than average. It's because there's a moratorium on the insolvent trading laws, which ends in September. Once October rolls around, the orange line will be well above the blue line as a whole lot of zombie companies go to the wall. And that's finance.
In the NRL, the Broncos have swapped monotonous training drills with good times and golf in a bid to break a 6-game losing streak. Coach Anthony Seibold took a back seat this week and allowed the players to dictate training and have some fun ahead of tomorrow's match against the Bulldogs at Lang Park.
Broncos HQ was a ghost town when the club would normally be holding its captain's run. Instead, the team was spotted heading out for some breakfast.
Yeah, just mixing it up, having a bit of fun.
Fun has been the theme of the week for Brisbane after a player-driven overhaul of the club's current training methods.
The reason why we started playing footy was to have fun, and we weren't having fun at training.
The week began on Monday with a round of golf.
We went offside and hit some golf balls as an active recovery session.
The players also got to pick and choose what they did at training.
There was a lot of us in the back there stretching, doing ice baths and saunas.
Captain Alex Glenn says the relaxed approach has given players a much-needed rest.
You shouldn't be coming in today going, man, I'm still sore from last week. And that's what it's been like the last couple of weeks.
The shackles have also been taken off Anthony Milford.
Instead of telling Milf how to play footy, let him do his thing.
The Broncos got to rip up Anthony Seibold's training manual this week with the blessing of the coach, who will be under immense pressure if Brisbane suffers a 7th straight loss when they play the Bulldogs tomorrow night.
When you got a head coach like that that's willing to change up his style of training for the benefit of the team, you know you're in good hands.
Anthony Seibold isn't the only Queensland coach feeling the heat.
Tedesco through the middle, back to Keary.
The Roosters scored 6 second-half tries against the Cowboys to win 42 points to 16 in Townsville.
Farikavalu's looking for 5. He's done it, I reckon.
It was the 5th loss in a row for North Queensland. Michael Rennie, ABC News.
Geelong's Gary Rowan has escaped with a fine after being reported for rough conduct in last night's 27-point win over Brisbane at the SCG. Rowan's bump on Ryan Lester was deemed low impact. He wasn't sanctioned for high contact over this incident with Brandon Starcevic. The Lions led by 22 points in the second quarter.
Yes! Oh, how good was that?
However, Geelong replied with 9 consecutive goals to make it 3 wins in a row and move to second on the AFL ladder. Some of Australia's leading netballers have taken aim at the sports administrators after a controversial rule change. Many are unhappy with the game's direction and want more of a say in its future. Patrick Galloway reports.
And flies that ball down the court to Bassett.
She doesn't go unnoticed on the court. Now Diamonds captain Caitlin Bassett is making her presence felt off it.
I think we've made ourselves pretty clear about how unhappy we are. I don't know about this one. Oh, she does!
Super Netball's decision to introduce a new 2-goal super shot weeks out from the season hasn't gone down well with players. For 5 minutes each quarter, goals will be worth double if shot from a set zone on the court. Many feel such a change shouldn't have been rushed through.
We've sat down as players recently and have come up with a manifesto about what it means to be a professional athlete, and I think that'll really be important to, what the game looks like for the next 50 or 100 years for us.
The lack of consultation was evident at one of Super Netball's most successful clubs of late, the Sunshine Coast Lightning.
I'll be very honest with you, complete shock. It came out of the blue.
Something as big as this, only 6 weeks out from the start, I think needed to be run by everyone.
Shooter Stephanie Wood is unsure how the super shot will change the game, although she does think it could create more dynamic players.
I do think that is a positive. Every time I coach younger girls, I tell them you don't want to just shoot from underneath the hoop.
While most are unsure exactly what impact the super shot will have, it certainly has got people talking about netball. This past week, Netball Australia announced the State of the Game review, designed to get input from all of the game's participants, including the players.
Going forward, we've made it very clear we want to be a part of this decision-making process, and we want that collaborative team approach like we do here with our clubs.
The season starts next month. Patrick Galloway, ABC News.
Weather now. There were some light falls along the east coast today, and inland Thargomindah got a decent dump of rain, 52 millimetres in the gauge there. Not bad at all considering their monthly rainfall average for July is 11 millimetres. It's southeast Queensland's turn this weekend. Cairns climbed to 27 degrees today, Rockhampton 25, Longreach got to 28 and Toowoomba 15. After a few overnight showers, Brisbane peaked at 23 degrees today, Ipswich and the Gold Coast 21. To the satellite, a trough in the east is bringing showers to southern Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, while a cold front is approaching Adelaide, leaving a trail of low cloud over WA behind it. A sunny Saturday ahead for Perth, Darwin partly cloudy on 33 degrees, Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra and Adelaide can all expect a shower, Hobart some morning fog and then a cloudy day. On the chart, a large high in the Tasman is drifting east and weakening. A strong upper-level trough will track eastwards across southern Queensland over the weekend. So Saturday brings a medium chance of showers through the interior, and then Sunday a high to very high chance of showers, patchy rain and scattered storms in the southeast quarter of the state. Around Queensland tomorrow, partly cloudy up the coast from Rockhampton through to Cairns. There could be a shower around Innisfail, mostly sunny through the Gulf and the northwest. A few showers around Charleville, Roma and Gundawindi tomorrow. Longreach partly cloudy and 28 degrees. Birdsville mostly sunny and 21. Into the southeast, a partly cloudy day, 23 the top on the Gold and Sunshine coasts. Applethorpe could get a shower, down to 8 degrees in Toowoomba tonight, 9 in Gympie. Only the slight chance of a shower in Brisbane tomorrow, 11 to 24 degrees in the city, Logan expecting 23. On Moreton Bay, variable winds up to 15 knots in the early afternoon, seas below a metre. And then we've got a high chance of showers, maybe even a storm on Sunday, continuing into Monday, and then it should dry out after that. And that is ABC News for now. Thank you for joining us. For news anytime, don't forget, head to our website or download the app. Good night.